Jazakumullah khair for being here this afternoon to do and to be a part of a class, a majlis of ilm, a gathering of knowledge that I think is extremely critical. And I hope the messaging around this class, this particular class, really was sound and came through to the community, because when the Prophet ﷺ says in the hadith, طلب العلم فريضة على كل Muslim, that seeking knowledge is an obligation upon every single Muslim. What the ulama say in particular about that hadith, like what type of knowledge becomes an obligation, meaning that if you don't seek it, you're sinful, right? Because, if you just kind of leave it unended, seeking knowledge is an obligation, and you just leave it at that, well, are we all sinful all the time for not always seeking knowledge? I mean, how does that kind of play out with regards to how the fuqaha and the ulama explained it? And really what they ultimately say is that the knowledge that is an obligation upon each of us to seek is the knowledge that helps us fulfill our individual obligations. So if I am a Muslim, I have an obligation upon me to learn how to purify myself correctly. I have an obligation upon myself to learn how to pray correctly. I have an obligation upon myself with regards to how to believe in Allah correctly. This is an obligation that if you don't seek that knowledge, you are sinful, right? And this is why this class is so critical. And it really is rooted in the fact that this idea of the fard ayn, the obligation that is upon each and every single one of us, is a concept that is a little bit missing from our communities, right? Where you have people who are, who've been Muslims for many, many years of their lives, converts or otherwise, people who were born into Muslim families, but when it comes to their basic purification, you see a lot of mistakes happening, right? A lot of mistakes happening. And it's because, it wasn't taken seriously from the beginning. When it comes to, how to pray correctly, if you miss a prayer, how do you make them up? If you come into prayer late, how do you make up those, units that you missed? All of that, this is basic, obligatory knowledge upon every Muslim. And so that's where this class becomes absolutely critical for each and every single one of us, right? Because we want to make sure that when Allah told us to do something, that we are doing it in the manner that is correct and pleasing to Him, right? Not just that I say that I've prayed, and the extent to which I really am confident that my prayer is sound is very much in question. That's why in a very serious hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, where they passed by a grave, and there were screams coming out of the grave, and one of them, the Prophet ﷺ said was, كَانَ لَا يَسْتَبْرَأْ مِنْ بَوْلِهِ, right? This person did not purify himself correctly from after urinating, right? And that's why he was screaming in the grave, right? And this was an indication that this person kind of, belittled the fact that they have to be very conscious of their purity when they were coming to pray. They ta'alu an dhalik, they kind of neglected it in a particular way, and that ended up with torment in the grave. Although this person was kind of praying in their own way, right, purifying themselves in their own way, but it was not sound, right? And this person had a level of, kind of neglect, right? So it's one thing to be in an ignorant state because you didn't know, and so you were doing things wrong, and you didn't realize you were doing things wrong, and you're repentant and you're seeking forgiveness. That's one state of mind. But to clearly neglect, right, that is where it becomes very dangerous for the believer, right? And so this class is really a class that should be taken by everyone in the community, right? Because the more I have been in my, in the imam role in different communities, the more I realize that the average Muslim, when it comes to how to purify correctly, there are a lot of issues. When it comes to how to pray correctly, there are a lot of issues. When it comes to basic aqeedah issues, there are a lot of questions that are up in the air. And so I hope that we take this class very seriously. It should be taken with the intention of saying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I want to ensure that my purification is sound, right? That I'm making wudu correctly. I'm making my ghusl correctly, right? That I'm using correct water, right? What kind of water am I to be using? That all of this is sound. That when I use the restroom, I'm doing the istinja correctly. All of that, this is fundamental knowledge that has to be learned.